With just a trace of right and wrong, one becomes lost, confused, distraught. This couplet reminds me of the story of Hui Ning when, after he received transmission from Hongren, and all the angry monks chased him into the mountain. Finally, one of the monks, Hui Meng, caught up with Hui Ning and demanded that Hui Ning return a robe and bowl which signified Hui Ning's receiving transmission from Hongren. But something in Hui Ning's demeanor bothered Hui Ming. It didn't seem to match that of a fraud or criminal. So Hui Ming asked Hui Ning, "Hongren said he transmitted the lineage to you. I want to understand the way. Can you teach me?" Hui Ning responded, "Just now, just at this moment, do not make right or wrong. Show me your original face, the face you had before you were born." Hui Ming bowed deeply and apologized to Hui Ning. Hui Ning lived several generations after Sang Song, but makes the same point, thereby illuminating the continuity of the tradition. In the case of Sang Song, I sense a Taoist presence in this couplet, particularly the teachings of Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi examines moral and cultural customs and comes to the conclusion that they have no inherent basis, that what one group of people considers good, another considers bad. We resist this kind of analysis, I think, because it makes us feel vulnerable to mean-spirited peoples and ideologies. Though we might find a little difficulty in agreeing with Zhuangzi about the arbitrariness of customs, e.g. when Zhuangzi points out that some people require the use of tattoos while others prohibit the use of tattoos, it becomes much more difficult for us when we take right and wrong to mean ethics in general. Do we really mean to say, for example, that we do not consider the Nazis wrong? Of course, Sang Song could balance this by saying he does not mean that he considers them right either. But somehow I don't think that would satisfy the questioner. Of course, it bears pointing out that intellectual/philosophical arguments against tyranny and aggression have not proven effective as a means of defense. No argument, no set of carefully constructed shoulds or should nots has ever stopped a bullet. Perhaps we should look elsewhere for a solution to history's field of sorrow. I remember reading a book that openly asked the question, "Does Zen have any ethics?" I remember feeling surprised by the question since the author had a broad familiarity with Zen. It seemed to me, as a Zen teacher at that time, that the precepts clearly function as an ethical dimension in Zen, and that the precepts have occupied a central place in the history of Zen. Why, then, would such a question arise? Because of our cultural background, we in the West tend to think of ethics as a system of commandments, of moral absolutes. We tend to think of ethical principles as transcending cultural context. For this reason, the West has felt completely justified in imposing its ethical norms on cultures it has conquered. When we in the West encounter a tradition that does not have ethical absolutes, we tend to think of that tradition as having no ethics at all. Therefore, the author encountering the Zen precepts, which function in the tradition as guidelines and not absolutes, would tend not to perceive them as representing an ethical dimension to the tradition. And Zen does not represent the only example of such an approach. Taoism, some nature religions, and modern existentialism also have had to withstand accusations of lacking an ethical dimension, and for the same reason. The divergence in understanding of how ethics functions, in the West as culturally transcendent absolutes and in Zen as guidelines or rules of thumb, emerges from their divergent understandings of how words function. In a previous couplet, Sang Song urges us not to go searching for the truth, partly because words cannot encapsulate the truth. In the Zen tradition, words function as indicators, generalizations, and tools, and in those contexts, words function fairly well. When we ask words to fulfill the task of naming the truth, however, they fail. They fail because words, all words, consist of generalizations, yet our experiences always manifest as particulars. The more abstract our words, the more difficult it becomes to apply them in our actual living situations, because our living in this world constantly presents us with new situations never before encountered. The world has an inherently creative aspect to it, ever emerging in new forms, a cornucopia of the unexpected. But words always reflect our past experience, arising from cultural tradition and personal memory. We then engage in a process of constantly modifying their meanings as we seek to mesh the world of words with the world of experience. In the West, words have the capacity to reveal ultimacy because of their connection to essence and being. The Platonic tradition asserts the possibility of ascertaining the ultimately real through reason and the use of words because words emerge from the transcendent world of forms. This Platonic tradition fit well with the Christian tradition, which views God as word giver. Combining the two traditions, the West holds a view of words which grants words access to the ultimate. Lao Tzu's idea that, quote, the name that one can name does not name the eternal name, close quote, still remains a bewildering notion in a Western cultural context. Applying the Western view of words to the ethical dimension, and we find ourselves faced with commandments, eternally valid ethical principles, statable in words. Because the Western tradition views the eternal as unchanging, divinely inspired ethics also should not change. Unlike Zen and Taoism, which views the unfolding newness and creativity of existence as its primary reality, the West views this stream of change as somehow not really real. The Zen response to our earlier question about Nazis would point out that precisely the rigidity of the Nazis' conceptual system, and yes, Nazis had a twisted kind of ethics, led them to their horrific behavior. But the solution to such human manifestations does not lie in offering another rigid system. History shows that revolutions fail precisely because they simply supplant one rigid system with another. Rather, it lies in foregoing the rigidity which produced that kind of behavior. A fluid conceptual function produces tolerance and a willingness to allow for differences. Understanding the creative aspect of existence results in a reluctance to impose one's conceptual scheme on the world. Rather, we allow the world to modify our conceptual scheme. Sitting in meditation, we directly perceive the fluidity as its core nature. The core nature of mind does not differ from the core nature of all of existence. Letting go of all things, letting go of right and wrong, confusion vanishes, distress fades, and the world emerges as a cornucopia of wonder.